So today, we're diving into a really critical diagnosis of Pakistan's education system. We're going to break down an argument that says the system's biggest problems, well, they go all the way back to the very beginning. Let's get right into it.
Let's just start with one number, 22.6 million. According to the source we're looking at, that is how many children are currently out of school in Pakistan. Now, that's not just a number, it's the backdrop for the entire crisis that we're about to explore.
And here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll define the crisis itself. Then, we'll trace it back to its colonial roots. We'll look at the impact on national identity, the way the system is fragmented, its day-to-day failures, and finally, we'll pull it all together for the final diagnosis.
All right, Section 1, a system in crisis. Let's start by getting to the very core of the problem.
Okay, so right off the bat, the source makes this really crucial distinction. It separates education, the actual process of learning, from the education system. And the system, that's the entire machine. It's the policies, the schools, the curriculum, the teachers, the exams, the whole shebang. And it's this machine that this analysis really puts under the microscope.
So that leads us to Section 2, the colonial blueprint. Because to really understand the system we have today, the source argues we absolutely have to look at where it came from.
Which, brings up the most basic question of all. Where did this thing actually come from? Was it designed from scratch for the needs of the people? Well, the source text has a very pointed answer to that.
And here it is. The central claim of this entire analysis is that the system wasn't built for Pakistan, by Pakistan. It's a direct inheritance, a hand-me-down from 182 years of British colonial rule. The argument is simple. It was built by the British, for the British.
Now, to get a sense of the context here, just look at this economic snapshot from the source. Before British rule, the Indian subcontinent had a 24% share of the entire global economy. That's more than all of Europe combined. The text argues that a colonizing power isn't going to build systems for public welfare in a place this wealthy. They're going to build systems for control and for extraction.
The source really nails down the motive with this quote. They changed the ancient systems so their government could continue and their occupation could remain. In other words, the entire purpose, the very DNA of the system, was designed for control, not to empower people.
Okay, Section 3, an identity adrift. So, if your education system is designed for control, what does that do to the identity of the people who are actually going through it, generation after generation?
Well, the source argues the consequences are pretty severe. It claims the system doesn't just fail to teach subjects, it fails to instill a spirit of freedom and self-respect. It's disconnected from the nation's core Islamic and cultural identity, and because of all that, it just doesn't provide students with a clear path or a clear sense of national purpose. It kind of leaves them adrift.
Moving on to Section 4, 3 systems, 1 nation. So, we've talked about ideology. Now let's look at the actual nuts and bolts, the structure of the thing itself.
Now, here's a really striking argument from the source. Pakistan doesn't actually have one education system. It has 3, all running in parallel. You've got the religious madrasas, you've got the mainstream public system for the masses, and then you have the elite Cambridge O and A-level system for the wealthy. It's literally 3 separate tracks, creating 3 separate societies under one flag.
And what's the result of that split? Well, the source puts it pretty bluntly right here. This produces 3 different ideologies and 3 different priorities. The argument is that this structure isn't an accident. It actively works against national unity, churning out graduates who have fundamentally different ways of seeing the world.
So we have a flawed origin and a fragmented structure. Now we get to Section 5, operational breakdowns. This is about the failures you can see every single day.
The first big operational problem, according to the source, is a total vacuum of philosophy. Great education systems have a clear why behind them. This system, the text argues, has lost its why. It's just running on autopilot, driven by bureaucracy and policy, but with no real unifying purpose.
The source also points a finger directly at the curriculum, specifically naming textbooks from publishers like Oxford. Now, the claim here is that these materials can actually erode local Islamic social and family values, creating yet another disconnect between students and their own culture.
And then, of course, there's the human element. The text flat out says that the processes for hiring and training teachers are fundamentally broken. And let's be honest, without good teachers, even the best curriculum in the world is basically useless.
And when we look to the future, the source flags another major concern: political and administrative moves, especially the big push toward privatization. It's seen as a major threat that could make the whole system even less fair and accessible.
And that brings us to our final section, number 6, the final diagnosis. This is where all of these different pieces of the puzzle click into place.
So the whole point here is to see how these flaws are all connected. The source's diagnosis is basically this: the system's colonial origin as a tool for control directly led to an ideology that's disconnected from national identity. That ideological vacuum then allowed a fractured structure of 3 competing systems to develop. And that broken foundation is why you see all the daily operational failures, from having no philosophy to poor teacher training. See, each flaw basically causes the next one.
And that's the diagnosis. The source doesn't really leave us with a neat and tidy solution. Instead, it leaves us with a really fundamental question. After seeing all these alleged flaws laid out, you're just forced to ask yourself, what should be the true purpose of an education system? For a country, for a community, and for every single student? And that's a question worth thinking about.